Vince Welch is an amazing producer and mixing engineer. He's one of the most inspiring artists I know, and I've been learning from and collaborating with him for the last 11 years. He's mixed a ton of albums, including every Bentley album, a bunch by Ben Levin Group, Justice Cow, and just about every project I've ever worked on. He knows so much more about mixing than I do, and I thought it'd be cool to hand him the mic to teach a lesson about mixing. Vince wrote this fantastic lesson about how to hear compression, and I think it's going to help a lot of people with their music and listening skills.
So there's a million videos on YouTube already about what a compressor is and how they work and all of that. But what I want to focus on today is, how do you hear compression? Like, what are you actually listening for when you compress something? If you're using a compressor without being able to hear it, it's like trying to paint in a pitch black room. You know, you can fling paint onto the canvas and maybe something interesting will come out of it. But you need to have that intention when you're painting. You need to be able to see what you're doing. And in the same way, when you're working with audio, you have to be able to hear the actual effect that your processing is having on it. So we're going to get into just a few actual practical exercises that you can use in order to hear compression. When you boil it down, a compressor is really just a device for being able to manipulate dynamics. So in order to hear what a compressor is doing, the first step of that is being able to hear dynamics. So we're just going to start with a simple crescendo. Obviously, you can hear the guitar getting louder. But let's dig in a little more to this example. All right, I want you to close your eyes, and when you listen with your eyes closed, really visualize what's happening. When the guitar is quietest, it sounds further away from you, and then you can hear as it's getting louder, you can visualize that as coming towards your face. And this is just kind of reflecting how sound works in nature, where generally the further away a sound is from you, the quieter it's going to be. It's important to realize that a lot of what we think of as depth in a mix is this front to back dynamic thing. You know, people tend to think that it's all reverb or ambience. And those do play a role in creating the front to back depth. But what it is mostly is just level differences. That's what's creating sort of this 3D effect. Now that we're starting to get the hang of hearing dynamics, we can start to work on hearing compression. So let's record something a little more musical. All right, that'll do for now. Let's listen back to that. When you listen back, let's do the same thing, and you're gonna close your eyes, and you're gonna really try to visualize this example. Try to see it, as well as hear it. What a compressor is going to allow us to do here is take the notes that are far away and the notes that are close to you and push them closer together. You can either think of it as bringing the faraway notes closer to you or pushing back the notes that are close to you. It's really the same. It's just the two are going to be closer together, and that's what we mean by reducing dynamic range. Here's Ben's guitar part. And we're going to dial in a setting on our compressor here. Before we go about jiggling all these knobs, which is, I know that's what we really want to do here, but we have to exercise a little patience. We have to think about why we're jiggling the knobs, all right? This is about setting kind of your intention. Every time that you put a processor, really of any type, on a track, you need to have an intention for it. Intention doesn't have to be a super concrete thing either. It's a perfectly fine intention if you just have a track and it sounds bad, and so you just want to take some random plug-in and jiggle some knobs around. That's fine, because you have an intention. You have a track that sounds bad, you don't know how to fix it, and your intention is for it to not sound awful anymore. That's that's fine. But we want to just be specific, and we want to know what we're doing before we start jiggling. Here's our intention. We just want to take some of the notes that are, towards the back right now, that are far away, and we want to just bring them closer together so we have less dynamic range. Find a spot where the guitar is sort of at its quietest, and you can kind of just see that on the waveforms here. Let's bypass this for a second and listen. Yeah, so we can hear kind of how that's corresponding to the visual. These two notes, very quiet, and then these three notes much louder. Especially this guy, very loud. So yeah, let's push them together. So let's just unbypass this and see what's happening with kind of these more or less default settings. Alright, it's a little much. Let's turn down the input to lower the amount of compression happening. Lower it still. Alright, there. Now we're getting kind of a what I'd call a reasonable amount of compression. Let's listen to that again. See how the needle is not moving really on the first two notes? That's good because we didn't want to compress the first two notes. Those are our quiet notes. We just want to be pushing back those three loud ones. So once more. So yeah, this is another spot where you want to close your eyes and visualize. Try to see the notes front to back. We still have some dynamics there. We haven't completely squashed it. You can hear how those last three notes are still coming a little bit towards you, but now compare that with the uncompressed and listen to that. With that, they're just like really jumping out, and in a lot of contexts, that's going to be too much movement. So once more, uncompressed and compressed. And let's compress that a little bit more to get something a little bit less subtle, let's say. So at this point, they're almost even, those two quiet notes and the three louder ones. So one more comparison. And then uncompressed. So we've been playing with these two knobs a lot, input and output. And so maybe you're starting to jones for us to twiddle with these two knobs, attack and release. And I don't want to spend hours here talking about an attack and release time because I could, and it would probably just bore the pants off a lot of you. But I'm just going to show you a couple little tricks that you can use really to just quickly set an attack and release time when you're dealing with a guitar that's not going to totally ruin the sound. Let's start with attack. So, and remember when I'm doing this, we're talking about hearing here. That's a big theme today. So really resist the temptation to just be focused on how I'm moving the knob. It's going to be a little more subtle here. So you're really going to have to pay close attention. Step one, we're going to take the attack and we're going to turn it just as fast as it'll go, which in the case of the 11 to 76 here means turning it all the way to the right to 7. Let's just take a listen to that real quick. All right, now I'm gonna bypass it and kind of toggle back and forth between those. And what I want you to be listening for here is listen to how when I put the compressor in, we lose the attack of that initial kind of transient of just the first part of the note. There's a little less high end. So check that out. Here it sounds kind of muffled, almost like someone put a pillow over it. And so what we're going to do now is we're just going to slowly decrease the attack time. We're going to slow it down until we get that high end back, until we take the pillow off, basically. So let's hear that. Now we have kind of more of that natural high end on the start of the notes that we had with the uncompressed version. So let's toggle between them again. They still sound different, but it's not so smothered anymore. So maybe the question you might be asking is, why not keep going with the attack? Why did I choose to stop it there? Why not keep going all the way until we have our slowest possible setting? Won't that just get us the most high end back? And it will get us the most high end back, but there's a downside to just turning the attack slower and slower, and that is, well, let's hear it. So by now, what's happening is the compressor is missing so much of the attack. It's taking so long to come in that we're kind of losing that dynamics squish. All right, so yeah, let's compare the slowest attack with it bypassed again. So if we go back to this more middle ground setting here, now we're getting some of our dynamics control back. Let's listen to that. So again, it goes back to closing your eyes and visualizing that front to back kind of thing. And hear how when we have it in the middle there at the kind of the nice spot that we found, we've got it pretty controlled. There's not a lot of movement front to back. But if we turn the attack all the way as slow as possible, let's listen. We got more of that dynamics than we actually wanted back. And so that's kind of why that's basically the perils of going, too far to the other side. But then we turn it back to as fast as possible. And the dynamics are nice and controlled, but we've lost that high end. And that can be a really big problem, because what people will wind up doing is they'll sort of set their attacks wrong on all these tracks with their compressors, and then they'll kind of hear this loss of high end and they'll try to compensate for it with EQ, which doesn't really work. Okay, we got just one knob left to jiggle here, and that is going to be our release knob down here. And so we're going to kind of take the same approach we did with the attack, and just to hear what's going on, we're going to set our release as fast as it'll go, and then we're just going to slowly back off of that. We're going to slowly slow down the release time. And so what I want you to listen for this time is I want you to listen to the sustain of the notes. And what's going to happen as we slow down the release, you're going to hear less sustain. So let's listen to that real quick. You can hear how the sound almost becomes more staccato as the release time slows down. Let's listen once more. So hear all the sustain on that. And then we move it to 12 o'clock and listen to the sustain now. Way less. It's a little counterintuitive to think of, but the release time is dealing with how quickly the compressor is turning off. How fast is compression ending, which means how quickly is the gain coming back. And so when we have the release knob set to the fastest setting, that means that our gain is coming back as fast as possible, which means it's coming back in time to hear the sustain of each note. So that's why we're getting more sustain on the notes when we have the release time set at its fastest setting. But really the important takeaway of this is just when you're setting your release time, especially with guitar, really focus in on sustain. That's what you want to be hearing when you're setting your release time. Just like instrumentalists have to spend years training their ears, so do us soulless computer button mashers that we call audio engineers. And it takes a long time. It takes a lot of hard work. But hopefully you've gotten a little bit of an idea of where you can start in that process today. And just remember, the key is keep those eyes closed and just listen. Focus on the sound that the compressor is giving you. Don't focus on where a knob is. Just focus on the sound.
Hey, press that button. Number 3.
Number 3.